wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life. This is the Sunday Stoic.
It's Sunday, time to improve our lives using the wisdom of ancient philosophy. I'm Steve, and this is the Sunday Stoic podcast. I'm going to try something over the next few months. We're going to do episodes called Getting Your Stoic Shit Together. I normally don't curse on the podcast, but for a good reason, I think. I treat this like the classroom I teach in, and I normally don't curse there either, but I want to drive home the point, and this is a critique on myself. I have all these ideas on how I can improve, things I could do to make my life better, to live up to the things that I'm talking about on this podcast, to live up to the things I'm reading, but I don't always actually pull the trigger and actually do them. And so that's what this episode and the following episodes that share this theme of getting your stuff together will relate to. So I'm going to ask for you to participate in these episodes involving this theme of getting our act together. And the way to do that is I'm going to ask you a few questions and ask you how it's going. And you can respond in a number of ways. You can, of course, send me a voicemail to the show phone number, which will be in the show notes and is at the end of the podcast. You can email me your response at sundaystoic@gmail.com. You can reply on Twitter at sundaystoic or on Facebook, where the Sunday Stoic has a Facebook page. One other way you could leave a voice response if you wish is going to the Wix site and clicking on the voicemail button and recording a voicemail using your phone or your computer there. So this week's question is, who are your role models? And if you don't have one, think about it and pick one or two and then share them, especially if it's someone we'll all know, or if it's someone like your grandpa. Tell me, you don't have to tell me his name or your grandma's name or whoever your role model is, but tell me about them, why they are a role model for you in your quest to become a better person. What were their character traits that you admire so much that you would set them up as your role model? The Stoics advocate that we pick role models to follow. There are some things about our character that we'll never outgrow. There are some things about us that we can't change. But there are other aspects of our lives, like increasing our wisdom, increasing our courage, etc., that we can change. And for these things, role models are an incredibly powerful tool. We can think, what would Jesus do, for example, is the common one, right? What would this person do in any given situation? How would they act? What would they think of me if they were watching me right now? These are all questions we can keep in the back of our minds as we navigate the chaos of everyday life.
A reading from Seneca's Moral Letters to Lucilius, number 11, on the blush of modesty. Your friend and I have had a conversation. He is a man of ability. His very first word showed what spirit and understanding he possesses and what progress he has already made. He gave me a foretaste, and he will not fail to answer thereto, for he spoke not from forethought, but was suddenly caught off his guard. When he tried to collect himself, he could scarcely banish that hue of modesty, which is a good sign in a young man. The blush that spread over his face seemed so to rise from the depths, and I feel sure that his habit of blushing will stay with him after he has strengthened his character, stripped off all his faults, and become wise, for by no wisdom can natural weaknesses of the body be removed. As I remarked, wisdom can never remove this habit, for if she could rub out all our faults, she would be mistress of the universe. Whatever is assigned to us by the terms of our birth and the blend in our constitutions will stick with us, no matter how hard or how long the soul may have tried to master itself. But my letter calls for its closing sentence. Hear and take to heart this useful and wholesome motto. Cherish some man of high character, and keep him ever before your eyes, living as if he were watching you, and ordering all your actions as if he beheld them. Such, my dear Lucilius, is the counsel of Epicurus. Choose therefore a Cato, or, if Cato seems too severe a model, choose some Laelius, a gentler spirit. Choose a master whose life, conversation, and soul-expressing face have satisfied you. Picture him always to yourself as your protector or your pattern. For we must indeed have someone according to whom we may regulate our characters. You can never straighten that which is crooked unless you use a ruler. Farewell.
When I'm building my cigar box guitar, sometimes I get in a hurry and I don't use a square or a ruler. I try to eyeball a straight line, and I fire up the saw and I cut the piece of wood, and inevitably every time it's crooked. You can't make something square unless you have a ruler to judge it by. In the same way, it's hard to live a virtuous life, a life of constant improvement, unless you have something to judge it by. In the reading, Seneca tells us that this friend of Lucilius apparently was blushing, which some people would take as a sign of weakness, apparently, but it's just part of his nature. It's in their DNA. It's not something that will change even when they become a sage, as Seneca puts it. There are some aspects to our life that we're not going to outgrow, and it might take some reflection and some thought to figure out which aspects of your life do you just have to learn to live with. But a whole lot of our lives, a whole lot of our character, we can change. We can pick a mentor. That can be someone you actually know, someone who you look up to from history, someone that's even fictional that provides an excellent example of strong character. You can make a list of their strengths. You can imagine they're watching you. Maybe when you're about to lose your cool, pretend they're in the room with you. You can think, how would they react in this situation? Keep them constantly in mind throughout the day as a way to improve your life. So as I said, this podcast is meant to get a little bit of feedback from the listeners, and I hope some of you really will get a hold of me. I want this to be about accountability. I want to be accountable, and I want you to feel accountable and to share with your fellow listeners some of your heroes or mentors. In terms of antiquity, I really like Seneca. Not because of his wealth, his possessions, his power. I like his attitude. He's not as severe, perhaps, as Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus. Maybe that's why I like him. He's a little more laid back. But he uses self-depreciation a lot, which I actually find very endearing as a way to not get too full of yourself. You know, for example, when he says things like, I am not your doctor, I'm a patient in the bed next to you. He also just reminds us all the time that he is not the wise man that he's talking about. He makes mistakes. He has a lot of refinement to undergo before he considers himself to be wise. However, when push came to shove and Nero ordered him to commit suicide, he lived up to what he preached, and he undertook the task without flinching, without whining, without moping. In fact, he consoled those around him, much like Socrates did when he was forced to commit suicide as well. So Seneca, I think, is a very interesting role model from antiquity that I like to keep in mind from time to time. When it comes to people I've actually known, I like to think of my grandparents. They lived through the Great Depression, through the Second World War. My one grandfather fought in the war, was involved in the liberation of Dachau concentration camp. He saw many horrors. Meanwhile, his wife, my grandmother, was a nurse back in the U.S. at the time. She worked occasionally at a German prisoner of war camp near our hometown. She had to give up a lot of things for the war effort, and the same thing on my dad's side of the family. They were farmers. They didn't have a lot, but they worked hard. They had this work ethic that's pretty amazing. They built their own buildings. They, plowed fields with horses and then switched to tractors eventually. But their work ethic was unbelievable. They raised a strong family, and they lived modestly all the way up to the very end of their lives. They didn't have a lot of stuff, and they knew how to have a good time. They didn't use gizmos and gadgets to have a good time. They used the company of others to have a good time. And they had a strong sense of right and wrong. And I look up to their examples of work ethic, of family values, and in terms of just taking care of everyone around them. In terms of, it was said by someone who used to come over to my grandmother's house that somehow or another, they'd always come up with an extra plate of food if company showed up. Even if they hadn't planned on it, they could somehow make it happen. They were always inviting, always welcoming, and they'd be there for you. Another friend said, your grandpa would literally give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. And I look up to that kind of character. What about a fictional hero? I don't know. I have a hard time with that one, but I'd say if I had to choose right now, I'd go with Doctor Who. Doctor Who is he's a complex character, but tends to do the right thing, even when it's costly, even when he doesn't want to. And I'll leave it at that. So that's my list. Seneca, for his humbleness, even though he was one of the richest people on earth. My grandparents, also due to their humbleness, but also their work ethic, their ability to care for those around them, and to live modestly, to do the right thing. And Doctor Who, also for doing the right thing, saving the world countless times, of course, and for doing it with a smile on his face. So contact the show. Let me know who your role models are. Those in the past, those alive, those who are fictional, and why. And I will open the show next time with your responses, and then move on to the next challenge for getting our Stoic shit together.
Thank you for listening to the Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, carpe diem.